My name is Matt Browning.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
I'm Emily Elizabeth Anderson.
I'm a podcaster, author, speaker, and cult survivor.
I'm a writer, speaker, trauma recovery advocate, and founder of Thriving Forward.
As a retired police officer who spent over a decade infiltrating secretive and closed societies, I have seen more than my share of traumas and pains.
I co-host a podcast called A Little Bit Culty. I also wrote a book called Scarred: How I Escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life.
You may recognize me from Amazon Prime's hit documentary series, Shiny Happy People.
A&E's Escaping Polygamy.
And the HBO docuseries, The Vow.
I am so excited to take part in this year's 30 Days of Courage, hosted by Courage 365.
This is an event for survivors and advocates.
It takes courage to lead. It takes courage to stand up. It takes courage to come together. And I hope we come together on October 4th so we can speak openly and frankly about what's going on in our world.
It's going to be amazing.
You are not going to want to miss this.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 30 Days of Courage. I'm Ashley Easter. I'll be your host today. I am the founder and executive director of Courage 365, and we are so glad that you are here. If this is your first time tuning in to anything that Courage 365 has done, I just want to tell you a little bit about our organization. We are a nonprofit for abuse survivors and advocates. We focus on healing resources, educational tools. We do a lot of different shows and create different resources for the community. And as you can see on the screen below, if you want to join our text message community, that's one of our favorite resources. We do not spam you. We just send you empowering text messages every morning, Monday through Friday, to help you in your survivor journey. I'm so glad that everybody has tuned in today, and we have an incredible panel here today for the 30 Days of Courage. I'm going to be telling you about a couple opportunities at the end to get yourself involved with this event throughout the rest of the month. We have other panels coming up. We've got self-care challenges. We have peer support groups. There's prizes that can be won. We've even got a game show that we're going to be doing at the very end of the month. That's going to be a lot of fun. So if you want to participate as an audience member in that game show, pay attention to what you learn here tonight, because some of the answers might come up in this panel and the others moving forward. Okay, well, tonight we are going to be speaking with three panelists. They are survivors and or advocates, and they have all come from either a cult environment or they've helped people escape from a cult-like environment. And we're going to be unmasking cults in this conversation. So without further ado, let me introduce our guests. Hey everyone, how are you doing today?
Hey.
Great.
We're doing good.
So good to have you. So we have Sarah Edmondson in the first screen. We have Matson Browning right there in the middle, and Emily Anderson on the end. I am so happy that you all are here. Just super honored that you would want to join us today. Well, how we're going to do this thing tonight, everyone, is I have a couple pre-planned questions that we're going to go over on this panel. And then at the very end, we are going to have a live Q&A. So if you've got questions that come up, please drop them in the comments at any time. You can save them till the end, or you can drop them now. But help me out there and use a question mark, so when I'm scrolling back through the comments, I can easily find the questions, because you all post so many supportive comments. But if you can use the question marks, that'll help me be able to pull those for the end. So make sure to stay tuned so you can ask our beautiful panelists some questions as well. All right, so I think the best thing to do would be for each of you to introduce yourselves. We've already talked a little bit. People have seen the trailer and a little bit about what you do, but if we could get kind of a 60-second recap of either the cult you're a part of or help people escape from, and just kind of like a little bit of your backstory. And Sarah, if you don't mind, I'll let you go first.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. So in 2005, I joined what I thought was a personal and professional development program. I was there for 12 years. It turned out to be a front for what the world now knows as a sex cult. Essentially, the leader was luring people in with the promise of reaching their goals and happiness and being the best version of themselves. And once they were locked in, he had other plans for them. When my husband and I found out what was going on behind closed doors, we became whistleblowers. We went to the FBI, who didn't know what they were looking at, so we went to the press. The New York Times published an article, which led to an investigation, which led to a trial, and the leader is now behind bars for 120 years. So that's the shortest version possibly I could tell you of the story. A lot of things happened in between there. All of that was captured in The Vow, as the trailer said. Oh, you can't see this here. I
Ooh,
still have my water bottle. And that led to the series coming out during COVID, which led to my husband and I doing a little bit culty podcast, where we talk to survivors and experts and whistleblowers to try to blow the lid off the shame of these stories so that people can understand how these things happen, so that they never join, or they can leave, they can exit, which I'm sure Matt will tell us about, and ultimately heal. So that's my life in a nutshell.
wow. Thank you. I know that was fast to go through. And everybody tuning in, like if you can drop in the comments if you've seen The Vow, or maybe have read Sarah's book or heard about the Nexium cult. I'd love to hear who all has kind of been familiar with some of this before. But yeah, thank you so much for that. Matson, will you go next, please?
I will. I can't really comment, but I have seen The Vow, and it's a great show. Very informative. My name is Matt Browning. I had the privilege or opportunity to help young ladies and women leave polygamous groups. I've helped people leave groups like the Kingston Clan, Davis County Co-op, FLDS, and some other ones throughout the U.S. Also, I was an undercover police officer, and I infiltrated white supremacist groups for 13 plus years. And so I also not only know the religious side of the indoctrination, which is um, so impactful in these cults and these organizations that I've infiltrated and helped people leave from. For some reason, religion, anytime you stick religion into anything, it turbocharges it, and it gives it a new level of not only violence but different things you need to understand. So I was able to go with escaping polygamy, help these women, and grateful for the opportunities I've had. And I'm grateful for organizations like this that we're able to talk about it and hopefully make some changes and help some people out.
Thank you so much. And you helped people escape on the show Escaping Polygamy. And I'm wondering if anybody has watched that TV series. I believe that was on A&E, right?
It was, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
A&E, Hulu. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that can still be streamed. So yeah, everybody be sure to check that out and let me know if you have seen Escaping Polygamy. Last but certainly not least, Emily, would you like to give us a 60-second version of your story and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, I'm Emily Elizabeth Anderson. I was raised in a patriarchal fundamentalist cult called IBLP, or the Institute in Basic Life Principles. It looked like a Christian ministry on the outside, but really it had a very dark world on the inside. The leader was Bill Gothard, one of the most influential evangelical leaders of the last several decades. And I was personally targeted by Bill when I was 13 years old and he was 71. I was sexually groomed by him for 6 years. And once I started to come out of the organization, I joined a lawsuit along with 18 other victims. And we fought in that lawsuit for 5 years against both Bill and the IBLP board. And we had to withdraw, unfortunately, earlier than we desired to, because that's how sometimes it works in the legal system. You don't always get the justice that you're seeking. But we did succeed, I think, in other ways where Bill Gothard is no longer the president of IBLP, and IBLP is very much floundering after getting so much bad media over the years. And now I run a advocacy ministry that I considered a ministry, where I work with women who are escaping similar backgrounds to mine and that are looking to heal from spiritual abuse and domestic violence that has ties to their religious community, and teaching them that having a relationship with God does not equal having to live in abuse.
Thank you for that. And seeing you featured on Shiny Happy People, I think a lot of people have watched that lately. And if you have, drop that in the comments if you've seen Shiny Happy People. You did such a brilliant job there, and the way that you went into the court system. I know we don't always get the justice as we want as survivors, and just the bravery and you doing that. I thank you so much for sharing your story and for how you're reaching out. And each of you, like, this is a thing, you all are on different documentaries. You've been on TV, but you're also real people who are survivors and advocates still doing the work today. And that's really why I wanted to bring you all together, because I feel like I know all of like the stories, and I just could not wait to see you all interact together, because I think you have so much interesting information to share. So the next question, I'm just going to pitch this out to any of you who want to answer. If each of you would like to, that is fine. But in your opinion, what is it that draws people into cults? And yeah, whoever would like to go first, just jump right in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, with the delay, it's hard to say who's going to talk. Quickly, I would say that it's case by case, but generally the through line is that people join because they are looking for something. They are drawn to, for me, I would say it's community, belonging, a sense of being a part of something bigger, a mission, and that is for sure a through line that the leadership or the group or organization, whatever it is, whether it's a yoga group or a church group or personal development group, is there holding out a promise, a carrot of something bigger or more, whether it's a mission or internal feeling or success. But there's an offer that you will have this thing or be a part of this thing if you join. And I think a big common draw that's consistent with the different people we've spoken to is that that it's something that they really feel like they will be a better person with that thing, or they'll be able to uphold their highest values with that thing. And it's, again, case by case, but mine was pretty clear. And then on top of that, there's some subtle or not so subtle manipulation techniques that prey on certain people's deeper desires, like for me, just even feeling special, feeling validated, external validation, things like that. So it's a very obvious draw, and then some more subtler draws. That would be my analysis. Matt, over to you.
No, that's
Well,
really cool, Sarah.
I think what you just defined was the really the recipe for any criminal syndicate gang there is that I've ever worked. When I think back on all the white supremacists that I worked in, the different organizations that I infiltrated, it was the same thing. People were looking for something. They're looking for something bigger than what they were. They're looking for a brotherhood or a family. And the interesting thing for me is that because I was able to work on escaping polygamy, I was able to help. I understand now what it's like to be born into a cult or born into a polygamous group, because they really have no choice. They don't know anything else. And when you're born into it, it's really all you know. Everything on the outside means nothing. It's everything that you're now being indoctrinated with. And so I think there needs to be that two different lines or distinctions where where you are groomed and you're grown and you're put into it, and then there's the distinction of if you're born into it, that's all you know.
That's so true. And Emily, I feel like you can probably speak to that part a little bit, being born into a situation like that.
Yes, I wasn't born into IBLP, but I was born into fundamentalism. And another very common draw that I see is especially with the type of cult that I was raised in, is you are promised predictability. And so everyone with my cult, it's a very family centered cult. And so everyone has a role. The fathers have a different role from the mothers, and the children have a different role as well. And there is a distinct hierarchy. And so there's this predictability of everyone knows what place they need to be in. And you are given a list of rules of this is how you, this is the identity you're supposed to take on. This is how you're supposed to act. These are the rules you're supposed to follow. And those rules go into every single area of your life, much more than just your belief system, but how you interact in just every aspect of your life with others, and how you manage your family. And if you do all those things and you follow the rules well, then you're promised a certain outcome. And this is what is sometimes referred to as a prosperity gospel, meaning that if you do all the if you follow all the rules and you do all the right things, then God's going to bless you with wealth or prosperity, physical health, all of those things. And really, it's all a lie. And it's crafted by one person who is using people for his own selfish gain. But I think that's really what draws people, is this predictability of, oh, I know exactly what I need to do. And if I do that right, then I will get these promised results.
So what I'm hearing kind of from all three of you, and all of your answers have been fantastic, but there's like a sense of purpose, there's a promise, and then there's certainty. And like that's what all humans want. Nobody joins a cult because they're like, I want to mess up my life, or and it's smart people, because all of you are intelligent individuals. And every survivor of a cult that I have met has been intelligent. And it's not that there's something wrong with the survivor. It is that the cult system is created to pull on those different pieces of human desire that we all have. I mean, we all want purpose. We all want to have a promise and some certainty in life. I mean, rules make things easier in a lot of respects, because you know what to do. You don't have those questions. So I think you all answered that brilliantly. Before we go on to the next question, does anybody have anything to add?
Yeah, just to add, it's actually a chapter in my book that the last thing that Keith said to me before I never saw him again was he was instructing me on doing this like promo video. And he said something about, make sure that my state is good, that I'm elevated and looking happy, because I was not. And he said the most important thing is that we give people the illusion of hope. And I think that I couldn't understand what he was saying in the moment, but later I realized that's the bait and switch that all these groups offer. They're saying there's hope, there's an afterlife, there's 50 virgins waiting for you in heaven, whatever the thing is. Making $1 million, blah, 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 enlightenment. It's an illusion. It's not real. And it never was.
For sure, for sure. Matt, did you want to say something? I don't want to cut you off. I thought maybe you were about to,
Oh,
maybe not.
no, I think what Sarah has to say is amazing, and Emily too, because they're actually they come up from it from two different angles, and it's like I'm the guy that came in to help people leave, and but you guys are amazing, and what Sarah just said is, you know, that's why we have Valhalla in the white power world, is because when you die in battle, you get to go to Valhalla, and you get to hang out with all your buddies, and that's what draws people in. That's why people want to do. That's this, and I wrote it down. This promised predictability is that we're promised eternal salvation if we just do what we're told to do. It
Yeah.
takes away all of our free agency. It takes away all of our sense of belonging. If we just do what this polygamous leader tells us to do, then we will be taken care of in the life after. But usually what these leaders want us to do, and you both can speak to it, is I haven't heard of non-sexual grooming or molestations or rapes that have happened in these organizations. It's just ridiculous.
So true. So true. All right. Well, that's super helpful. Let's move on to the next question. And for the next three questions, I have one for each of you. And so, Sarah, you're up first. And the question I wanted to ask you was when you were in Nexium, I just finished reading your book. And one of the things that I took away from it was some of the concepts you talked about in the beginning about empowerment, some of them made sense. Some of them seemed on the surface to be helpful, but then as you dove in deeper, they were really used in insidious ways. And so I guess kind of my question for you as somebody who was in a group that was very promoting like women's empowerment, and then it was exactly the opposite of that, like how do you kind of distinguish between true empowerment language and language that's just being used for manipulation?
It's a great question. A couple of things I want to say, especially in regards to the last question, is that I've really come to understand how language is used to manipulate. Loading the language, or loaded language, is a term that's quite common in the recovery space, as I'm sure you know. And empowerment was one of the draws, one of the carrots of the illusion of hope, being empowered, being your own. I mean, this is across the board in all of these groups, especially MLMs, when you come with terms like hashtag boss babe and giving women, especially now, it's very trendy. It's very, it's a concept du jour of how to, be your own boss and be empowered. So I think that just like all of these groups, like you said earlier, nobody joins a cult on purpose. What is the honey on the outside of the rotten apple that's drawing people in? A lot of people and a lot of women joined for their own empowerment, for their own success, for their own happiness. Then DOS was introduced, and Jeunesse and these other programs within Nexium towards my later time there. And empowerment was just another carrot. And we believed that it would be the next step in our growth. To be truly empowered would be amazing. I mean, if DOS really was what it said it was, it would have been great to have a group, a women's group started for and run by women, where we could uphold each other and keep each other accountable to our goals respectively and be there for each other. And like, that would have been amazing, but it wasn't that. So how do you know what is real empowerment versus another false promise? I'm still learning that, I'd say, but I'd say knowing what the red flags are to discern what is somebody who's actually offering you empowerment versus empowerment that is enslavement, which is what I see not just with Nexium, but with so many specifically MLMs and opportunities that are pretending to give women empowerment and give women an opportunity to, do all the things to earn income and be mothers and all that. And really it's just another level of enslavement and another false promise. So I think to determine the difference, you have to understand who's offering it, who benefits from you signing up for such a thing, where does the money go, how does the compensation plan work, have there been people who've left who are saying it's not empowerment? How are those people spoken of? Are they written off as being crazy and jilted lovers? How are there lawsuits? Is there bad press? Are there defectors? Where there's smoke, there's usually fire. So I think anything that you're being asked to participate in, whether it's empowerment or a church or a yoga studio, is you got to do your research. You got to research well.
That's really helpful. And I think it's so interesting too when you were talking about loading the language, because I know from the cult-like background I came from, something like the word rebellion had a lot of loaded language to it. And so somebody might hear the term rebellious and it could even be a positive term. I mean, even like in the American Revolution, like rebellion was seen as like a positive thing. But in my group, it was, like rebellion is like the sin of witchcraft. And if you practice witchcraft, you're going to hell. And, it was like it had like all these different meanings behind it. And so even when you were talking about these different empowerment concepts, it's possible that people can be saying the same word but have like two different definitions behind it. And cults are really
Mm.
about like having an alternate or twisted definition of something that may be used otherwise in pop culture. Um,
Yeah,
wow. Wow. Very helpful. Thank you so
that is
much.
true. Of course.
Emily, I have a question for you, and that is, would you mind talking a little bit about how family units can become like cults? I've definitely seen how, particularly in the IBLP, like you have like this cult leader at the top, but it also, I think it talked about in the documentary, and I've seen this, where it almost turns individual families into cults. And so I wondered if you could kind of talk about that and, how maybe it's a different feeling when it's kind of your family creating that environment, and just what your thoughts maybe are on that concept in general.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite quotes from Shiny Happy People was from a fellow cast member, and it was Bill Gothard turned every father into a cult leader and every home into an island. And I thought
Hmm.
that was so brilliantly well stated. And yet, not every single family had a dominant father figure. So with my family, it was a little bit different. And this is one aspect that made my childhood so confusing, was that we were involved in a patriarchal cult, but we didn't have a patriarch, not in the way that a lot of other families did. Because my father was a very abusive person, but he was too busy working and finding fulfillment in his work, and then not being faithful in his marriage. He was too busy with that to be involved with IBLP. So he actually never studied the materials that me and my mother were studying or going to any of the conferences. It really was just me and my mom. And yet, when I would go to these conferences, I would hear about this patriarchal structure and how important it was, like, for fathers to pick the suitor for a daughter, and how that works in all of courtship, and how the role that fathers are supposed to play in leading the family, and all this. And my father wasn't doing that, and so all in my head I'm trying to think, well, I guess my mom would do that because my mom is really acting more as the spiritual leader of our family. And it was so very confusing. Um, and so I know I'm not the only one who experienced that. I know that there were other families that were had different family dynamics going on that were preached, and yet they were still, it was a very, very messed up system. And so every family had their own dysfunctional ways of applying the teaching, or at least trying to apply it. And also, families were really pitted against each other. There was a term that's come up recently in a book about IBLP, called model families. And this was very much a thing in IBLP, where there would be some families that would go up to the front stage during the conferences, and they would be promoted as just the poster children, poster family, for this organization. And they were doing everything so perfectly. And the children were so obedient. And the mother just had this, never broke her smile, and was supposed to be all peaceful with 16 children around her. And um, the rest of the families in the audience would look up to those model families, and they would a lot of times feel this intense pressure and shame of, we're not that good and we have to get that good. And so there was this constant competition between families of who can be better, and who can be, in my cult's case, who can be more godly, and follow the rules all the correct way. So there was a lot of those really dysfunctional dynamics going on within families.
That makes sense. And I'm glad you brought that out, because I really enjoyed the Shiny Happy People documentary. But one thing that I thought could have been, I don't even know if it could have been done differently, but there was there's so much nuance to this that it's just impossible to cover all of the different experiences of people. And so, while some family systems became cults, others became some other different kind of dysfunctional, and it's not easy to just paint it all with a broad brush stroke. But I think that's really helpful to see how in a system like that with all the rules and the promise of certainty, there can still be so much confusion. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Can I add something as a non just from an outsider uh,
Please.
with because I my background is like atheist, Anglican, Jewish, nothing. Like I don't have any religious. Like I had a bat mitzvah, but I wasn't raised religious. My parents were like, "You figure it out," and then I joined a cult. So anyway, but when I watched Shining Happy People and I read different memoirs from fundamentalist Christian different sects and different backgrounds, I see it's such a similarity where the patriarchy is the like the man is in charge of the house, which is definitely fortified with your story from what I could see, Emily, with Shiny Happy People, like with that umbrella of the God and then the man and then the woman and the kids, and that seemed just like it's just so horrific to me where that construct gives the man the right to be horrifically abusive because he becomes authoritarian and that's the rule. It doesn't matter what it's such a carte blanche for such abhorrent behavior, and it's like it just could be so written off. And this is what bothers me the most about the religious cult says there's always this like, well, God said, I spoke to God and he said I should beat you, and then the leaps that are made from there. I spoke to God. Seems like even though Tammy's only 11, I'm going to take her as my bride. Like, what? I'm not going to swear. I promise. I said I wouldn't. But like, this is the stuff that really gets me riled up.
No. If you're
Right.
gonna
And
swear,
I
these are
wasn't
the
even in
kinds
it.
of things to swear about.
I
And
wasn't even
that,
in it. Like, yeah.
go ahead, finish.
No. That's it. That's it.
That unlimited power
Yes.
attracts abusers, very
Yes.
much so. And I certainly saw that a lot with families that I knew and survivors that have spoken out. I mean, it's just incredible how much abuse ran rampant in this organization, as it does so many cults, but it really attracted abusive men because they were the ones that were given almost all of the power. And just like you said, they could get away with just about anything because they could blame it on God, that God told them that they could do this. And women and children were completely silenced.
Right. And before we kind of get into your question, Matt, this conversation here was sort of one of the questions that I had further down. And that was just really like, what are some of the similarities that you see between the different groups you are part of or observed? And patriarchy definitely seems to be one of them. Matt, I'm just curious, kind of in relation to this conversation that we're having, are there any other similarities that you've noticed between the different groups that stood out to you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, once you start looking into it, they're all the same. It's manipulation. It's all the same manipulation. And if you really look into it, especially on the religious side, I'm a religious person, but I know that the true teachings of religion say not to hurt your wives, don't hurt your kids, don't rape the 12-year-old next door, don't do things like that. That's not religion. That's a perverted, twisted person who says that God told him to do that when he didn't. God would not do that. And so when you look into it, it's all the same. And what I tell people is if you take religion out of whatever you're in, they're still committing crimes and they're still doing bad things and there's still things that they need to be held accountable for. And that's what we should look at, because all religion is, to me, is a crutch that people use to do bad things at times. Religion can be an extremely good thing that makes people motivates people to do better. But at the same time, it also motivates people. I've talked to people that have said they've prayed to God and God told them to go kill the guy on the corner. I've talked to guys in jail cells who've told me that God told them to do this and that. And that's just a twisted, perverted, messed up individual. And so my whole thing about it is once man a twisted leader interjects his beliefs, that's where we have a problem. That's where women start getting hurt. That's where the men become the complete rule. And I tell you, I work very closely with my wife, Tani. And I know for a fact that I would not be able to do nearly, you know, a quarter of the stuff that I do without Tani's help. It would not happen. And if you read The Hate Next Door, I talk about it all throughout the book. Tani helped me write the book. And before she helped, it just sounded like a police report, and those are really boring. So, she interjected her beauty and love and grace into it. But that's what I think. Once we start looking into it, Nexium is the same as the FLDS, which is the same as the Kingstons, which is the same as the shiny happy people, which is all the same twisted. Man wants money, man wants sex, man wants to hurt people.
Yeah, yeah. And I know men and boys can definitely be hurt in these cults too, but it does seem like a lot of them are run patriarchally. I think it'd be interesting. We'll have to pull on somebody who's been in like an all women's cult kind of thing. I think that would be an interesting perspective as well at some point. But the majority, it does seem that patriarchal thing is there. And
Can I just add one more thing real quick? Within one of the groups that we've worked with, some of the boys don't even know how old they are. They don't have birth certificates. They've been molested by leaders. They've been beat down by family. And so the boys are victims just like the girls and the women are. And that's why we need to expose it, and we need to let everybody know that this is out there, and we really need to work together and get this stuff taken care of.
That's really powerful. And everybody listening, if you have questions, go ahead and start dropping them in the comments. I'm going to ask our panelists one more question, and then we're going to get to the live Q&A. So if you have questions about what we've talked about, if you have questions about the respective documentaries that they've been in that you haven't had answers to, go ahead and drop them in. My request is if you could use a question mark in your questions so I can skim through and find them easily in the comments. So we'll be bringing that up in just a minute. But really my last question for everyone is, I have worked a little bit behind the scenes with TV production, and I know that you can film 60 minutes and only 60 seconds of that 60 minutes will get on camera. You can have 10 different points and they only choose 2.5 points to put on. And so I want to go a little bit deeper than what has been on the documentaries, and I want to ask you to share something that you wish would have been talked about more. Maybe there wasn't space, maybe there wasn't time, maybe what you said got cut, but like something that you wish had made it in, that you like to share now. And whoever wants to go first, just go for it.
Well, I can speak for Escaping Polygamy. We did a lot of seasons and a lot of episodes. I think what and unfortunately what we don't have time to show is actually the care that is taken with these girls. And in a few instances, the men would leave. It's not just show up and they want to leave. They're waiting for you in the driveway. There's a lot of fear, a lot of courage it takes for these, especially young women, to step up and say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. They're fighting family, they're fighting neighbors, they're fighting communities just to leave and be left with nothing. And so I think what people really need to understand is what wasn't shown is the tears, is the pain, is the hours and hours of talking to and Tani is amazing with these young women, and what she does with them is unbelievable. But it's time, and we can't fit the whole time into a 40-minute episode.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And I have seen, kind of working behind the scenes, that sometimes the amount of support that goes into it off camera, which shouldn't make it on TV, because some people need their vulnerable moments private. But it's there and it's really valuable, and people don't even know that that exists. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that to light. What else? Anything that you thought should have made it on screen but didn't?
One thing that I wish had been featured on Shiny Happy People that I've personally experienced and that I run into almost every single day with my work with Thriving Forward is the connection between cults, whether it's living in one or escaping one, and chronic illness. There is a
Mm.
massive connection between the two, whether it is a religious cult or non religious. When you're in one and when you're leaving one, your body tends to be under an immense amount of stress and chronic stress. And after years and years, that tends to find a place in the body. And it is just staggering the amount of survivors that I work with that also are dealing with major chronic health issues, especially now that they're out and their body is starting to feel safe enough to really crash. That's kind of when they really feel it for the first time, when they're not living on that pure adrenaline anymore. And it's just heartbreaking to see, because here you are trying to emotionally recover, sometimes having to completely rebuild your community and your belief system, and your body does not want to cooperate. And so it's really heartbreaking to watch. And I wish survivors would um, take peace in knowing, maybe peace isn't the right word, but take encouragement knowing that they're not alone in this, that unfortunately having health challenges after you leave a cult is just incredibly common. And sometimes it can take years to reverse that damage. And that's one thing that I really try to work with survivors on is how can we learn how to give your body what it needs, what it's asking for right now, so you can begin to heal not only emotionally, but physically. And, a lot of times that's bringing in a lot of professionals. We get therapists to help with the emotional healing, and finding really great physicians to work with, and psychiatrists and psychologists to work with that can really help you have this whole body like recovery process after you leave a cult. That is just so important, not to leave the physical side out.
You are so right. As somebody who has a chronic illness, and um, yeah, it's one of those things where my therapist was telling me about that connection, and there's research about the particular autoimmune disorder I have being connected with trauma, and it's so fascinating how the body works like that. The body does keep score, but also very heartbreaking, like you said, and a lot of people don't know that that's common for survivors, and they can feel isolating, but just to know that they're not alone in that, I think that's really, really helpful and often not said. So thank you for that, Emily. Thank you. And Sarah, what about you? Anything that you wish had been put on screen?
Honestly, I feel like the people who made The Vow did a really good job at showing the bulk of the story, and there was still more. There's a component of the whole thing that transpired in Mexico, which there was not enough time for them to get into that into season 2, which I was hoping, because it was quite prolific there, and I think that would have woken a lot of people up that are still to this day believe that Keith is good and running like underground Nexium programs in Mexico. That I wish had been in there. Other than that, I think, because I have to watch a lot of these documentaries. I don't have to. I love to watch a lot of these documentaries for the podcast. And I see one of the things I see as a consistent problem in others is that they make the easy documentary of like, oh, this guy's so gross, this guy's so bad, look at all the bad things he's doing. They tend to not show the journey of like what really hooks people, what was good about it at first, what they thought they were signing up for, which is what we're quite proud of. That I think The Vow did such a good job at showing people to the point where people would come up to me and said, "Oh my god, I totally would have joined that. It looks so great," until the end of episode 1. And we try to give people that same dignity when we interview them for a little bit culty. Is we really want to show like what it doesn't look like what you see now, because when you show people what it looks like now, sashes and bowing and branding and polygamy and all the things, it's like, well, that just looks crazy. Why would you want to be a part of that? Because it doesn't look like that at first. It looks like something totally different, and it's a very slow line bending to the dark stuff and the bad stuff. So generally, I felt good about what they portrayed.
That makes
Can I
sense.
add something real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure.
I think you both hit on it really well. Is that one thing that I've seen when people leave these organizations is people go up to them and said, "Really? You didn't see this was going on? You didn't see? How could you not see? How could you not know?" And what that does is increases the amount of shame that a person is already feeling to be part of one of these groups to start with, which then goes into the mental health. And I made a promise a while ago that anytime mental health is brought up, I'm going to just say it. Mental health needs to be taken care of with anybody leaving any of these cults, any of these um, twisted organizations. It has to be dealt with because the amount of shame that these people are feeling and what we as a community, all we want to do is understand what they're thinking, what they're going through. And sometimes these questions are we need to be more compassionate to them and not say, why did it take you so long, but say things like, hey, I'm glad you're out. What can I do to help?
Yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
True. All right. Well, we've got some great comments that are coming in from our community. Again, if anybody's dropping questions, please make sure you add a question mark because that's the only way I'm going to see that it's a question while I'm skimming here. But the first one here, I think we'll give it to you, Sarah. It says, how do you all navigate the contours of coming out of systems of sexual power and control to find healthier relationships with sexuality outside of cult land?
Well, I think I'm going to revert to another question I saw in the chat about therapy, because I think it goes hand in hand. And for me, the last 6 years of healing has been pulling apart this like knotted necklace of all the different beliefs. And sometimes I pull one out, I'm like, wow, is that old like axiom language? And then I have to bring it to my therapist. And I have a regular therapist, and then I have a cult specialist therapist. And then I think one of the biggest um, therapeutic things that I've done is just being in open, honest, non-suppressed, non-filtered conversation with ex-members where we talk about these things freely, which I didn't even realize we weren't free to do when I was in it, and looking at what the belief is. So whether it's a sexual thing or a communication thing or a relationship thing or a work thing, whatever it is, there's all these tangled beliefs, and I just have to figure out what's mine and what's theirs and what do I believe now. So in regards to, what was the question? What was the exact thing about sexuality?
So, basically, about how you can find healthier relationships with your sexuality after you've seen sex use in power and control situations. I'm paraphrasing there, but.
Yeah, I guess just through more therapy and conversations and being open to different approaches, watching movies where it's like a normal dynamic and not like, I don't know, 50 Shades of Grey or whatever, like just something that's healthy, not a power structure dynamic. Maybe not good to go from a cult to like a BDSM thing, you know,
Might be a
somewhere in
little
between.
space in between. Not kink
Yeah.
shaming here. People do consider
No,
what you wish,
just
but
just be
you may
careful. Just be
be here.
careful. Yeah.
um, Emily, I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about some therapies that you, either yourself or in other survivors that you talk to, have found to be helpful, just for people to kind of understand, because there's so many different kinds of therapeutic tools, and I'm wondering if there's anything that comes to mind for you that you'd want to share.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not a therapist, so I have to be careful in what I say, and I don't want anyone to think that I have more authority in this area than I do. Personally, I have tried a few things, and I have found EMDR therapy to be very helpful, but that is not going to work for every survivor. And so that's why I believe it is so very important that you work with a professional. A lot of individuals that come out of religious organizations have been told that therapists are dangerous because they are secular, and that you should only go to a pastor for counsel, or maybe a biblical family counselor. And I really encourage survivors that that ask me questions on this, is that they work with a licensed therapist who has particular experience in high control groups, religious trauma, if you've been in religious trauma, or whatever type of trauma that you've been through, whether it be sexual trauma or um, spiritual abuse, whatever it may be. Work with a therapist that has those proper qualifications, and then ask what are different kinds of therapy that might be particularly helpful. Maybe you've got possible blocked memories. There are different types of therapies that can really target those, but that's something that you need to talk to a professional about. So I really just encourage people to do their research and find somebody that specializes in backgrounds that the client has grown up in. But just to name one in particular, EMDR was an excellent experience for me, and I know it has been for other survivors. Not everyone, but for some it is great. And that is eye movement and desensitization therapy. And it is helping you reprocess memories by using your right and left brain through moving your eyes back and forth, or a few different methods that help you process that memory in a safe environment, so that your body can calm down and it is healthfully processed and put away in the right way in your brain.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's really useful. And I'm glad that you gave kind of the caveat of like different therapies work for different people, and there's no shame in it if one person's type of therapy doesn't work for you. Like it makes sense. We're all different people and we have different traumas. And if anybody's looking into the different therapeutic modalities, trying to find a therapist, if you go to courage365.org/free, or just go to our website and click the free resource tab, we have a whole workshop and ebook about how to find a therapist with a checklist you can go through, different types of therapies you can read about, and kind of getting a plan so you can interview your therapist ahead of time before you even step in the office, because they work for you, not the other way around.
Can I add one other thing? Just
Yeah, go
popped in
for
my
it.
mind too. It is normal to have to go through a few you might have to go through a few
Yes.
therapists,
Yes.
because you need to find someone that clicks with you. And if you go through a few sessions with someone, I recommend like giving it maybe 4 to 6 sessions to really see if it's actually going to work. Once you get through all the introduction, they start to understand a bit more of your background. If it's just not working for you, there is no shame in trying somebody else. And sometimes you have to try a few different ones before you land on the right one. And then sometimes your therapist is there just for a certain season too. So I've had some that have helped me get through certain areas of my life, and then I kind of grew out of them. And then I entered a different area of my life, and I needed somebody else that had expertise in that. So like when I got married, I started working with a marriage and relationship coach. That was really, really helpful for me because marriage was completely new to me, and I had no idea how to do marriage equally. And so I needed someone to coach me in equality in marriage. And so like that's where I am right now. And I'm sure I'll be at a different place one day if I have kids. So don't feel ashamed if you need to switch therapists to find the right one.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And
Can I
that,
add? Can I add one more thing?
yeah, just
We're
real
running
quick,
out of
I want
time.
to be able to get through all the questions
Yes,
and respect your time as well.
I'll be super quick just to say that for me, in addition to what Emily just said, I completely agree with all of it. Big part of my therapy was spending time in nature and doing a lot of self-care and doing things on my own schedule, not doing things for other people, and freeing my calendar of all such things, and like learning to go to farmers markets and make pancakes and do things that were not on other people's schedules. So doing therapy is part of it, but healing is a whole gestalt of things.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. And after this being a very full month for me, November is going to be a lot of self care.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, this question is for you, and it says, are the women of escaping polygamy still active in helping people escape? And are you as well?
Yeah, I don't think you can leave any of these organizations and not still be into helping people leave. You know, once you make that decision in your life and find out that everything you've been told is full of hypocrisy and lies and everything else. So, you know, you have um, Andrea, Jessica, Chanel. They're still doing their thing. They're great girls. They're great women. They have desire to help. Um, and as far as me, I'm I really can't talk about it, but just stay tuned. So
I like that answer. Thank you, Matt. A question specifically for Sarah. Has your Nexium experience impacted your approach of friendships with women now? It seems like you built such a strong bond with women there, and you talked about how hard it was when you learned women you trusted weren't truthful with you or were so far in what they believed, the lies themselves. So, yeah, what is your approach to friendship now with women specifically?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd say that I'm back to being trusting again, although I still have it in the back of my mind, sort of what's possible, not just with women, but just generally about the types of personalities that are out there that I'd never considered before. Um, but I feel like I see women in a much more positive light now, and I love my sisters, and I've also done an international move from Canada to Atlanta, and so I'm kind of starting again in many ways, and that's been hard. But I have wonderful women friends all around the world that I still call daily. So thank goodness for FaceTime.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Emily, a question for you. It says, leaving the IFB cult, I find many saying that speaking out the way survivors are is damaging to the good that these systems give to their communities. Terms being used, especially in my realm, are you're bitter, angry, and so on. What is a great response to give to us? What is a great response to those giving us pushback for telling our stories, how we are choosing to do it, or that we are right or wrong for the way we tell our stories?
Hmm. Usually, when you speak truth, you're going to become the scapegoat in a abusive dynamic. So it's very common for survivors to be attacked by those who want skeletons to remain in closets, and for secrets, family secrets in particular, to be remain a secret. But one thing I tell survivors is that it was your abuser's own abusive actions that destroyed their reputation, not your unveiling of it. And
Mhm.
so it's really important to be able to discern that it's the fallout that may happen from telling your story is because of all the evil things that were done by really awful people. It's not because you chose to shine light and to expose the evil that is there and to speak the truth. Like, yes, we should be speaking the truth, and we should be able to confidently own our stories and know there is nothing wrong with doing that and sharing what your experience is. And if that has a negative impact on your abuser's life, then they should have treated you better.
Yes, yes, and can I add
Yeah,
a
go for
statement? You can say, "Goddamn right, I'm angry because you fucked up." Sorry.
it. Agreed, agreed. Yes.
Uh,
Okay, this is a question. I'll just ask maybe one of you to answer this. And it's, how do you know a therapist is safe? How do you vet them? There are many abusers hiding behind the power of psychology and psychiatry. Thank you for your discussion. Because that's true. I know some people who've been abused by therapists. And so, how do you vet them? Does anybody have any tips for that?
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I, everybody is going to be messed up in one way or another. I mean, therapists have therapists. So I think a lot of it has to do with how you, as the victim, you as the survivor, feels. And if you need to go into it as for people leaving these organizations, you're no longer a victim. You're a survivor. You've stepped out of the pains. You stepped out of what is happening to you, and you survived. Now what you have to do is tell yourself that, and you have to build up the courage in your own mind to step forward and to just to be able to know this happened to me and find that therapist. Now, when it comes into finding therapists, as somebody mentioned, it might take 3 or 4 different times. It might take 10. It might, who knows how long it's going to take to find that one therapist that's going to say, yeah, I get it because of this, or I see it because of this, and we can work through for this. And that's why everybody has said therapy is so important, but stepping outside of therapy and going outside is even, I believe, at times is more important. Traumas cause different things in people. Trauma can cause anger. And if you have anger, what's the best thing you can do? You can hit a punching bag, you can go to the gym, you can work out, you can run, you can do all kinds of things. But you just have to find what's best for you. And that includes finding a therapist. So my thing would be ask.
Yeah.
One thing that I tell a lot of the women that I work with that have just left an abusive situation or they are desiring to leave an abusive relationship is that you can trust your gut. And that is something that survivors that are either in an abusive relationship or they're raised in a cult, you're programmed to not trust your gut anymore, that your gut is wrong, your intuition is wrong. And when you are coming out of that, you can look hindsight and say, I did have a feeling that those things were wrong. I didn't feel right about this. There was always that little seed inside of me that was telling me something's wrong here. And you can tap into that and you can know, okay, my gut was right then. And I was told not to listen to it, but I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to listen to it now. And I think that's really important when you're working with a therapist. If something just doesn't feel right to you, you can walk away from it now. You don't have to continue on in an uncomfortable position because you think, well, they're a therapist and so they must have more knowledge than me. I mean, if your gut is telling you that their recommendations to you are not safe, then you can listen to your gut. It's probably right.
Thank you for that. I'm a big trust your intuition person, as some of you know. um, yes, 100%. And like I said, kind of some tips for vetting therapists. We have that in one of our ebooks / free workshops that you can get on our website at courage365.org. There's a lot of things to kind of figure out about your goals and values and what you want or don't want in a therapist, and kind of how to do the interviewing process so you can have a better shot at getting the right therapist for you. But as with all things, we know it can be tricky if there's an abusive therapist. And there is support and help, and we do actually have a need help tab on our website. And one of our listed resources is how to get help if you've been hurt by a therapist. So you can find that at courage365.org as well. The last question we have here that I'm seeing is, with documentaries, tabloids, etc., there's always a marketing hook that's used, like sex cult or demeaning language to survivors like swindled or duped. How do you wish interviewers / reporters would change their approach with telling these stories? And I would just pitch that out to all three of you as our last question for the night.
I can.
I honestly
Go ahead. Go.
okay, just to say, I wish that, and I call these networks out all the time on the podcast because I just there's like I got this from Sarma from Bad Vegan. She says it's not documentaries. There's document. What does she call it? Entertainment documentment. So some combination of those two words. Like it's not a documentary. It's just purely for entertainment, pretending to be a documentary. And I think a lot of the ones that you can see that in are totally doing it for the clicks, and it's very salacious and not survivor focused. Not all of them are, but the ones that are I find really grotesque. And I just encourage those networks and the producers, the production companies that make um, those ones, is to think about like they're exploiting victims, or survivors, as you said, Matt, really well put. I think that they need to have trauma experts on set and in the writing room and in part of the PR team to do it properly and to give survivors dignity. Um, Sex called is something we talk about a lot. Is it like it's double-edged sword? It's great in terms of not great. It was useful in terms of sounding the alarms and getting people on board with taking immediate action because there were literal slaves in this case, and there are many cults actual sex slaves. Is it a brush stroke that can be horrible and demeaning and terrible and have tons of collateral damage for so many people? Yes. I don't know how to balance that line, and we're still trying to figure it out. But yeah, some people just do not care. They just want to make a buck and get on the cult documentary train.
Yeah, that's really useful. Matt?
I think that well, I come from a different. I'm lucky to come from where I come from because on escaping polygamy, first of all, River Media did an amazing job.
Yes.
Second of all, my wife on the show, as well as Lori Stryer, and what they found is I've done thousands of interviews in my career, thousands of them, and I couldn't talk to these women. You need a woman to talk to these women because as a survivor, they've already been threatened by the men in these organizations. They don't need to feel threatened by me. They need to feel comfortable in telling their story. They need to feel comfortable in knowing that if they start breaking down, Tani would get up or and give them a hug during the interview. And that's what needs to happen. Now, when we talk about the other things, you're right. People are just going to say whatever they want to sell a story, and that's why we talked about earlier these click words, these phrases. In the white power world, there's certain words that are used that invoke emotion and fear and anger and violence. And in selling documentaries, I think it's the same thing. And I'm just grateful that I can honestly sit here right now and tell you that all of the women that were part of and men that were part of escaping polygamy, we made sure that they felt comfortable, that they were taken care of during the interviews, and if there was any problem whatsoever, Lori and Tani would stop. They would take care of what the problem is before they would continue, and that's we need to take care of our survivors like they're survivors. They're brand new out. You're talking 30 minutes to an hour out of a cult. They should be treated like that.
Wow, yeah, and I've also worked a bit with River Media and have just seen the care and tenderness, and so that does give me hope for the media world and how they're presenting. And it sounds like you had a similar experience with the vows, Sarah. But yeah, Emily, do you have any thoughts on this?
Mhm. I was lucky. I had a good experience as well with my producers.
Right.
I was going to say some of them. I had good experiences with individuals that weren't tied to bigger companies, if that makes sense,
It does.
because it does tend to be the biggest companies um, do tend to be more focused on statistics and how can we make money with this production, and they kind of lose the vision that, or just the understanding that you're working with survivors. And so the producers that were the ones that were actually working with the survivors, and that were doing the interviews, like those were the producers that I had incredible experience with. And I'm so grateful for that. I have seen too with IBLP that unfortunately the sexual abuse tended to be the hook that blew everything open, because the original whistleblower group was a website called recoveringgrace.org, and it was a group of survivors that were starting to tell stories about their experiences in IBLP. And this was before IBLP was getting negative press attention and before Gothard was removed from power. And Recovering Grace wasn't getting a ton of attention until they published their first story of sexual harassment, where a woman was sexually harassed by Bill Gothard. And then things blew up very quickly after that. And it's disappointing because it's almost like some individuals, especially in the media, think that is going to be sexual abuse is more damaging than other kinds of abuse. And I would not agree with that. There are plenty of individuals in IBLP that were not sexually abused and went through all kinds of other horrors and went through psychological abuse and emotional abuse and very dysfunctional family relationships that have caused a great deal of pain as an adult now, and they're trying to heal from that. And so I think it's very important that we realize that a lot of times in these cults there can be multiple different kinds of abuse happening, and no one type of abuse is more egregious than another or has a greater impact on a victim than the other. All forms of abuse are very damaging to victims, and it's important to realize that, we need to talk about all of them, not just sex abuse, which tends to be the one that rises to the top.
That's really, really powerful. And kind of what I'm hearing from what all of you are saying is there's just an extreme lack of understanding, I think, in most popular media outlets. Whether it's a lack of understanding about what survivors go through and how language can really affect them when it's in the headlines. Kind of what you were saying, Emily, I kind of wonder if people know what sexual abuse is. And so that's an easy thing for people to say that word and people to understand it. It's a little bit more difficult for somebody like, I don't know, CNN or the Washington Post, unless it's like a deep dive article, it's sometimes hard to describe different methods of spiritual abuse to people who maybe even aren't religious themselves, and for them to try to write about it. And so it seems like there needs to be a media education training out there somewhere so people can understand that there are different types of abuse other than sex abuse. There are different words that we can use to be sensitive to survivors and our telling of their stories, and certain ethical guidelines that should be followed. And so thank you all so much for this. It's really been a pleasure having each of you on the panel tonight. I've learned so much. I know our audience has. Thank you everybody else who's been tuning in. Before we go, I have a couple quick announcements, but I just want to, again, express my great gratitude to you, Emily and Matt and Sarah. It's been so good. And everyone, I have posted in the group a whole carousel type thing, a bunch of graphics with links to their documentaries, to books they have, blogs, podcasts, the whole 9 yards. It's in there if you want to connect with them. From those places, you can also find them on social media very easily. So I would encourage you to follow them. But yeah, thank you all so much. The last thing I want to talk about real quickly is we have a giveaway that we're going to be giving out this weekend for people who have participated in our week 1 self-care challenge. If you're just hearing about this for the first time, I want you to know that there's still time to get in on this giveaway, to get in on the self-care challenge, and you'll find the challenge pinned to the top. There's some journaling prompts that you can either put in your own journal or download the journal page that we have for free for you. And there's instructions on how to enter for the giveaway. If you complete all 4 challenges, you'll also be entered into the grand prize that we'll be offering at the end of the month. But this week's prize is a set of tea drops. They're really fun teas. I love them. I've had them a bunch. They're very calming and relaxing, just a little bit different than your regular tea. So be sure to check out that self-care challenge and catch up on that. The other thing I want to mention to you is on Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you get the time zone right, because I know different people are all over. We have a peer survivor support group / discussion group. And this is really great. It's only 30 minutes long. Some of the board members from Courage 365 are going to be hosting these each weekend. And if you are one of those people that's like, I want to get into a community with other survivors, and it's been great in the Facebook group. I've seen you all posting your introductions. If you haven't done so, I would encourage you to do that, because that's a great way to meet other people. But if you really want to have a chance to talk to other survivors, these Zoom support groups are a great way. It'll be pretty informal. There'll just be a couple of discussion questions brought up, but you can share what you're struggling with, aha moments you've had from the speaker discussions, or different things going on that you'd like to share, or you can just sit in and listen. You don't have to share. It's not a share or die situation. But if you want to join that, you can go to the events that are pinned at the top of the Courage 365 group, and from there, I'd click going, so you'll be notified about it as a reminder. The Zoom link is there, and this week our host for that is going to be our board member Marianne, and she's just amazing, so supportive. You're gonna be excited to meet her, so I would encourage you to do that. But everybody, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Please invite your friends and family to this group. If you want to invite them, you can go to the top of the group and the Facebook group and click the join or rather invite tab, and you can go through your friends list and invite people that you think might find this helpful and interesting. The replay will be here, and of course next week we've got another panel for you. So stay tuned, and sending you all so much love. As always, live with courage.